Hi class, this is our beginning video for some techniques that will help you with all of your watercolors later. So here we go. Okay, we'll get the camera situated here so you can actually see what we're doing. All right, you'll notice I've got my palette, I've set my table. Big thing about this is making sure you've got everything together before you start, because once you get going, you're going to need just to keep working. A second. All right, so I've got my palette, I've got my water cup, I've got some paper towels. I've got my masking fluid. I've got a little container of rubbing alcohol. I've got my little container of salt. Now, this is not normal table salt. This is like the salt you put on a driveway. So that's where we're headed with that. It's nicer because it's a little bit coarser, and I'll explain why later. You've got your little pipette for your alcohol or your water. You have a brush that is kind of a junky brush. Now, this is not, this is a fairly decent junky brush, but don't use this one for the masking fluid. Okay, we'll talk about it again in a minute. But so you'll need two brushes. You need your good one, your good round brush. This is a number 8, Low Cornell. This is, whatever was in the cupboard. All right, and you'll need a pencil. You will also need tape. All right, the first thing is you've all got a board. Now, I'm using a smaller board because it'll fit here on the camera so you can actually see what we're doing. And we need to stretch your paper, and all that is involved is getting that paper so it's down, so it's not going to bubble up so bad on you. So you're going to take your paper and your tape. Make sure it's down pretty good. Make sure you've got one piece of tape that goes the whole length, because you want it to kind of be even. I like keeping a nice even, this little margin to be even, because then when you get all done, you have this nice little white strip around your artwork. Make sure you're tearing off enough tape so you don't have to do this in 2 parts. This doesn't look quite as nice. Now, you'll notice when I set my table, my palette is on my left side. I am left-handed, and so that's why I've got it. If you are right-handed, you'll put it on your right side, your palette, or if you're at one of my little desks, you'll put it up in front of you, up here, and you'll have your board down here. All right, now, it doesn't matter which way your board goes. Because of filming, I'm having it, putting it vertical. If it works better for you, put it horizontal, it doesn't matter. All right, because this is just the little introductory beginning techniques, we're not making a pretty picture. We're just trying out some stuff, which is really fun. So you're going to take a line, take a pencil, run it right down the middle. Can you see that? I'm going to make mine really dark so that it shows up on the film. And you're going to make essentially 6 squares. We're not measuring these out, just, whatever you get is fine. All right, so you're going to have a wash, and I'd have you label, let's have you label these. There's a wash and a graded wash, G-R-A-D-E-D, wash, dry brush, wet, into wet, and I'll explain all this stuff later. Okay, additives. Okay, we're going to add some stuff to it, and masking fluid. Okay, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to put that masking fluid on so it can dry, okay, because we want to play with all this other stuff, but we want to, when we get to this stuff, we want it to dry, be all dry. All right, Getting the lid off might be the hardest part of this thing. It's kind of like a rubber cement based stuff, okay, if you've ever played with that stuff. It's white, it's gooey, it dries like crazy. All right, now, there's a trick to this. You've got this bottle of stuff, but then I've got this little container of soap. This is just normal Dawn dish liquid. And I'm gonna put just a tiny bit of water, make sure the water's clean. Well, I guess, you know, it's just better if it's clean. Okay, just a little tiny bit of water in there, and then I'm gonna take my little junky brush, and I am gonna just swish it around in that soapy water. Okay, now the reason is that this masking fluid will stick to the bristles of that little brush, and it will never come out. Okay, we've tried everything, it doesn't come out. So you need to, you know, get it soapy, just slightly soapy. It doesn't have to be right in the blue stuff, but just in some soapy water, and that'll act as a surfactant. And then when you go to wash the brush out, it'll come right out because it's kind of, the bristles are kind of slippery. All right, and then you're gonna just reach in here now. It's kind of gooey. I'm gonna move it up toward the camera a little bit here. All right, and then we're just gonna paint just some lines in this just to see what it does. And what this does is it's a masking fluid that will adhere to the paper for a little while until, and then you let it dry, and then then you can paint right over the top of it, and anywhere you've got masking fluid will be totally white. Just keeps the paper clean. You can use tape as a masking, and then with this, it's just a little tiny bit. I'm just gonna rinse it off in my water. Make sure you do that immediately. You don't want to leave masking fluid in a brush, even a junky brush. So see it all came right out. See, all nice and clean. Okay. All right, let's play with the rest of this thing. All right, a wash. What I need you to do now is mix up some color. Now, in an ideal world, you would have put a little bit of water in each one of your colors already. Let's see if we can get that in here. Okay, so we've got a little bit of water in our colors, so they'll be easy and they'll start to hydrate. Okay. Okay. That's what these little pipettes are for. These are brilliant. That's a pipette. It's like a little eyedropper that holds a whole lot of water, lots of water. Okay. All right, get your brush nice and wet. Mix up a nice batch of color. Now I'm going to use blue just because, not because of any real reason, but I'm just going to mix up a puddle of blue. Make sure it's got enough color to it. Don't keep it so light and pastel-y that you don't have any guts to your color. All right, and we're going to make a wash. Now the goal of this wash is to just make a nice solid tone on your watercolor paper, okay? And what you're going to do, and the trick is to not overwork this. So you're just going to take your brush and you're going to kind of lay it down, okay? And you're going to run it sideways. All right, now if you want to brush over it twice, that's fine. Get some more color, come along on this wet side, down this wet side again. Notice I am not going back and forth. I am not scrubbing it. I'm just going over it once. If you can get away with just doing it once, do it, because it's going to look better. Anything you go back and say, oh, I'm going to go correct that little piece in the middle, that's going to make a mess. You're going to end up with a bloom, okay? So if you just do it once, you're going to end up with something that's solid that looks pretty much like that. And that's looking fairly respectable, okay? That's a nice solid wash. Now, if you need to pause the video to do this, pause it now. All right. Okay, so you've probably done this one now. It's starting to dry a little bit. Now you'll notice I'm leaving a little bit of white area between this square and this square for obvious reasons. If you go right up to the line and think, oh, I'm going to be this so nice and tidy, it's going to bleed into your graded wash. That's not going to be pretty. All right, so let's mix up some more color. You can change colors if you want, whatever you want to do here. I think it's fun. It's always a good idea to practice mixing colors, so throw in a different color. This is turning out to be like a really bad color. Hang on, let's make it prettier. All right, so I'm going with kind of a bricky red. It's blending into my blue, but that's okay. That's what palettes are for. It's kind of going purple on me. That'll be fine. All right, So I've got this kind of dark red going on here. Now a graded wash is just what it sounds like. It starts out as a solid up in here, and then we're going for, let's get it to have a gradation where it goes into a lighter tone or a lighter value, okay? So we're going to start out exactly the same way as we started out the graded wash. Taking my brush and I'm kind of laying it down and I'm pulling it sideways across my paper like that. All right, now I'm going to go twice just because. Now, instead of dipping back in my paint, I'm going to dip back in my water. And I've got just clean water on that, and I'm going to take it along that line, that wet line of my paint. Ah, look what it did. It pulled it down. Now, let's do it again. Once again, clean water, pull it across. I'm not touching this stuff up here because then it'll make it light and it'll be weird looking. Pull it across. One more time. Take it down, and look at that beautiful gradation of color we're getting. Now, it kind of swims around in there a little bit, so it's not going to be perfect, but should look something like that. Okay, all right. Okay, next thing, we're going to do wet into wet. So in this little square here, what I'd like you to do is draw me some shapes. Now they can be an organic shape. I'm actually going to make this one have a donut hole in it. Okay, this one I'm going to make into a triangle. Let's see, let's make a little shape down here. Maybe that's kind of a complicated shape. All right, now this is just practicing what watercolor does best. And what it does is it stays where you tell it to, if your paper is dry around it. So now I'm painting in my little shape, in my little triangle. I'm being a little bit careful, and you have to work a little bit fast, but not too fast. And I'm just getting it wet. Now it doesn't need to be puddly. Don't let it be puddly, just glossy. So if I look at it kind of sideways at an angle, let's see if I can tilt this at all. Let's see if you can see. All right, there we go. If I tilt it like that, see that reflection? Just glossy. All right, and then you're going to work a little bit quick here. Don't spend all day mixing up your colors. And grab a little bit of color. And we drop it in. And look, see, it's going to spread. See, and it's going to spread all over the place. But it's not going to go outside of that triangle because this is dry out here and this is wet in here. Okay? Now you can keep your wits about you on color mixing because, you know, put complementary colors, you're going to get brown. If you pick colors that are going to mix well together, you're going to have something kind of beautiful. So we'll throw some things in and get a little bit of a purple out of this. Maybe. So over time it will change because the colors will start to mix and push each other around a little bit. All right. Now, same thing here. Let's do this one, and I'm going to leave that little middle donut hole dry. And this is how you get really nice, tight watercolors. And people say, well, how did you get the watercolor not to go over all over the place? Well, you use decent paper for starters. And this is a Richardson student grade paper, which is great for practice. Jack Richardson makes good paper. Okay, so now I've got this little organic shape around here, kind of wet. All right, it's just plain water. And I'm going to throw in some color. This might be a little trickier to see, and it's just kind of spreading around in there. There's an old saying that says that watercolor is the only medium that paints itself. And that's kind of true, because you can kind of leave it alone and let it do its own thing a little bit. Think that oil paint doesn't do that. It's pretty much sticks where you tell it to. But watercolor will kind of spread around a little bit. And if you learn how to kind of embrace that and control that, it's really fun. See, you just lay that down and it's kind of doing its own thing. I got outside my line a little bit. That's not a big deal. All right. See how it's spreading around? That's fun. All right, you can even do teeny little shapes this way. Like this little bitty kind of backwards L shape. Okay, looks like a backwards C or something, I don't know. Just a little organic shape. But see how that just swooshed around in there? I'm just gonna leave that alone and let it just go and see what happens to it. All right. So that is wet into wet, okay? Fill the area with water, drop your paint in. All right, the next one is dry brush, and it's also just what it sounds like. Get some nice pigment over here. And this is what we put little details in. It's gonna get, you're gonna get texture with this. Now, as soon as you got, I mean, you'll obviously have paused this video so that you can work on this, okay? I'm not telling you to pause things, but please pause so you can actually do things. All right, so this next one is dry brush. And this is how we're getting texture and little bitty, like little sticks and stuff like that. Now, since we don't have black in our palette, let me show you really quick how to mix black. Now, you've got a nice brown. You've got a burnt umber right here, and I'm going to go a little closer here for you. Okay, so you've got a good burnt umber. If you mix that color with some of this ultramarine blue, you're going to get a nice, respectable black. Now, with my beginning students, if it starts going kind of gray on you, you're like, it's not going black. That means you don't have enough pigment. You've got way too much water in it. But look at that nice black you're getting. So that's a mixed black, and that's really a nice way to make black, because if you need to cool it down and it needs to be kind of a bluish black, you can totally do that by adding more ultramarine. If it needs to be a warmer black, you can throw in some more burnt umber, and it's kind of a brownish, you know, warm black. And so it's very versatile. It works great. It's a really good dark color, and that's what we use instead of black, because black has a tendency to kill if you put it in, it just grays down your colors. All right, so dry brush is just using the point of your brush for part of it, and you can come in, make little grassy things, make little trees, things like that. This is going to take a little bit of a practice for, you know, with brush skills, okay, is using just that little point. Takes a light touch. One trick that kind of helps when you're learning how is have your hand resting on the table and use your fingers to move the brush. Also, another key thing about dry brush is sometimes we want a texture that is the texture of the paper, and so we take our brush and we kind of, it's not too wet, and we wiggle it and then we drag it. And see how you're getting the little bits of white paper showing through? That's a nice texture. We can use that in shadows. We can use that in making brick or concrete that we want kind of a textural roughness to it. And so I'm doing it again here. So try that. It takes a brush that doesn't have too much water in it. It's got some pigment, and it looks like you need to go back over it. You know, it's one of those that people go, ooh, it didn't cover, I need to go back over it. No, leave it like that. Look at that beautiful texture. Okay, so let that be texture. On this paper, it kind of looks like snow. It's kind of fun. Okay. All right. So now pause your video and do this part. Okay? Okay, you probably paused your video. Now, let's do additives. So we're going to have you put in a nice little wash. Remember, you did a wash up here. This is just the one where you, so mix up some nice color. Mix, 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 mix. All right, mixing a nice purple. Okay, it's got enough guts that it'll work. All right, so we're going to pull that across. I don't love that color. Just a minute. Now, the reason I don't love that color, it just didn't have enough pigment in it. It wasn't showing up good enough on this paper. So I'm like, I need a little more. So, okay, I'm going to make a nice wash out of this. Okay. and this happens to be blue, doesn't matter what color you use. They all work differently. Sometimes it's kind of fun to use Viridian on something like this. Probably not yellow. I wouldn't use the really, really pale colors just because the additives aren't going to show up very good on them. All right, now, this is the fun part. Okay, so this is my alcohol. It's just normal rubbing alcohol from the Walmart. Okay, and I'm taking my little pipette, make sure it doesn't have any water in it. I just spilled it. All right, and you're going to take just a little drop of it and see what it does. And what it's going to do, see what that did? It made a little dot. In fact, it made a big dot. I'm going to move it up here so you can see. Look at that. All right. The cool thing is it makes little layery dots when you have multiple drops. Okay. This just makes a really fun texture. Okay. It's a very interesting texture. They overlap each other. It's not a texture you can control a lot, so you've got to do it somewhere that you think, oh, what, something I can do something a little bit experimental on. Now, while this thing is still wet, you're going to grab some salt. This pretty much only works when it's wet. All right, now, we don't care that there's rubbing alcohol, because that rubbing alcohol is probably almost evaporated by now anyway. And I'm just going to throw a little bit of salt into some of my wet areas. What the salt does is it kind of acts like little miniature sponges, and it sucks up the paint. Now, you really can't tell what it's going to do until all of your paint is super dry, and it might take a few hours for it to do that. I'm just pulling it up here. See, these are little tiny salt crystals right here. Okay. And we're just going to let them sit there. Don't move them. Don't rebrush the thing. Nothing. Leave it alone. Okay. And then we'll see what happens. This salt is one of those things. Sometimes it looks really cool, and you go, wow, that was a neat thing. And then sometimes it doesn't do anything, and there's no way to fix it. It's experimental, and sometimes it works. So I don't normally use it on things that I really need it to work, because I do other things like flick masking fluid at it or something like that to get those little white dots. But it's an interesting additive. All right. Okay. Now remember, we put masking fluid down here, right? Okay, I'm going to pause your video so you can play with this. First of all, you're putting in the wash, then you're putting in the alcohol, then you're putting some salt in those wet areas. Okay, pause it. Thank you. All right, now you're back. Okay, now that you're back, remember how we put masking fluid in here? All right, we're going to mix up some color. I need a different color here. I'm kind of stuck on the blue today. And, pardon me, I've got some salt floating around here. Okay. All right, so that masking fluid that you've put on here is going to leave it white. You can kind of tell. Now it'll leave it kind of white right now, but you can play with this and you can throw colors at it. And you can say, oh, I'm going to do all this stuff. So you can get this amazing wet into wet, lots of washes, lots of crazy colors. But those are going to stay completely white. So what I've done is I'm just going to play with that color. Get lots of juicy colors running around in there. And then in a few minutes, when it completely dries, then I'll pull that masking fluid off. I'm just playing with color for a minute. Not trying to make anything. Just throwing some fun colors in there. Okay. Okay, and you can already see that it kind of repels the paint. Okay, but it'll even be better after when it's all the way done. It'll even work with the additives. So if you threw some alcohol over the top of that, it kind of works around it. So I'm going to throw some of that on there too. Because these work together. I mean, you can work everything together. And sometimes you get some really nice depth of color and depth of texture. That's what happens if you put more alcohol, then you get this kind of, almost looks like some kind of a rock formation. Okay. All right, now let's let that dry for a little while. Okay, so this is the assignment. You're going to do a wash, a graded wash, dry brush, do both kinds, the little skinny lines and the where you're dragging it across and getting some of the texture of the paper. Wet into wet, where you paint it all with water, and then you come in and drop color into it. Additives, start with a wash, and then add your additives over the top, and then your masking fluid, which put the masking fluid on first, like we did just now. Okay, so that's your assignment for this one. Now, to turn it in, you'll just photograph this after it's all the way dry. One little note about that, after it's all the way dry, it might take a couple of hours, brush the salt off into the trash can, and then photograph it and show me what happened, because it's very interesting, you know, what kind of different effects we're going to get. Photograph it, upload it to Canvas. Thank you. See ya. Bye.